The warning came on a Tuesday morning when most of Earth was still drinking coffee and checking the morning news. Admiral Jake Morrison was in his office on Luna Station, reading reports about the new mining operations near Jupiter, when his communication panel lit up with an urgent signal. The red lights meant only one thing. Someone was trying to contact Earth from outside the solar system. Jake pressed the accept button and watched as his office filled with blue light. A hologram appeared in front of his desk, showing a creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. The alien wore elaborate robes covered in gold symbols, and its yellow eyes stared down at Jake with obvious disgust. "I am High Archon Veltar of the Galactic Hegemony," the creature said in perfect English. "I speak for an empire that rules over 70% of known space. We have watched your species with growing concern." Jake leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. He had been expecting this day for years, ever since humans had figured out how to travel faster than light. It was only a matter of time before they ran into whoever was running things out there in the galaxy. "We are listening," Jake said. The alien's head tilted to one side. "Your species has developed space travel without our permission. You have built colonies on worlds that do not belong to you. You have acted as if you have the right to expand across the stars without acknowledging the authority that governs them." Jake felt his jaw tighten. And what authority would that be? "The Galactic Hegemony has maintained order in this galaxy for over 2,000 years, Veltar continued. "Every species that reaches the stars must earn their place through service to the Empire. Some become workers, some become soldiers, some become food, but all must serve." The hologram flickered and changed, showing images of different alien species working in what looked like massive factories and mines. Jake saw creatures that looked like giant insects carrying heavy loads, while others that resembled walking plants tended to machines. All of them wore metal collars around their necks. "Your species will report to the nearest hegemony processing center within one standard galactic cycle," Veltar said. "That is approximately 18 months in your time measurement. You will surrender all weapons, all spacecraft, and all claims to territory beyond your homeworld. In return, we will find suitable work for your people within the Empire." Jake stood up slowly. "And if we refuse?" The alien's mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "No species has ever refused. But if you choose to be difficult, we will simply cut you off from the rest of the galaxy. No trade, no communication, no travel beyond your solar system. You will sit alone in your little corner of space until you starve, or come to your senses." The hologram disappeared, leaving Jake staring at empty air. He reached for his communication panel and started making calls. Within an hour, every major leader on Earth and in the colonies knew about the alien ultimatum. President Lisa Carter called an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Representatives from every nation and colony gathered in the Great Hall in Geneva, their faces grim as they listened to the recording of Veltar's message. "The choice before us is simple," President Carter said, standing at the podium. "We can surrender our freedom and become slaves, or we can stand alone against an empire that controls most of the galaxy." Director Paul Hayes from the European Federation raised his hand. "Perhaps we should consider negotiation. Surely there must be some middle ground." General Kate Sullivan from the American Military Command shook her head. "You saw those images. There is no middle ground with these people. They want complete submission or nothing." Dr. Alan Rodriguez, Earth's leading expert on alien species, stood up from his seat in the scientific section. "I've been studying the data we've collected from various sources over the past few years. There are species out there that have escaped from hegemony control. They tell stories about what happens to civilizations that surrender." The hall fell silent as Dr. Rodriguez activated a holographic display. Images appeared showing ruined cities and empty worlds. "The hegemony doesn't integrate other species," he said. "They absorb them. They take everything useful, technology, resources, people, and discard the rest. Entire civilizations have simply vanished after agreeing to join the Empire." A representative from the Asian Alliance stood up. "But what choice do we have? They control 70% of the galaxy. How can we possibly stand against something that large?" Admiral Morrison appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from Luna Station. We've been preparing for this possibility for years. Our military has been designed specifically to fight against overwhelming odds. We have advantages they don't know about." "What kind of advantages?" asked President Carter. "Our ships are faster and more maneuverable than anything we've encountered so far," Jake explained. "Our AI systems can adapt to new situations in real time. Most importantly, our people know how to think for themselves instead of just following orders." The debate continued for 3 days. Some argued for finding a way to negotiate with the hegemony. Others wanted to fight immediately. A few suggested hiding and hoping the aliens would forget about Earth. But as more information came in from Dr. Rodriguez's contacts among the escaped species, the choice became clearer. The hegemony had never allowed any species to maintain their independence. They had never shown mercy to those who resisted. They had never kept their promises to those who surrendered. On the 4th day, President Carter called for a vote. The result was unanimous. Earth would not surrender. Jake Morrison sat in his command center as the response was prepared. The HFY message would be broadcast on all frequencies that the hegemony used, ensuring that every ship and station in their empire would hear it. President Carter's voice filled the communication chamber as she spoke into the recording device. "To High Archon Veltar and the Galactic hegemony, the people of Earth have considered your ultimatum. We reject it completely." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "Humanity has spent its entire history fighting against those who would make us slaves. We will not stop now. The Terran Federation hereby declares the Galactic hegemony persona non grata. Earth's borders are closed to all Imperial vessels. Any attempt to enter our space will be considered an act of war." The message was sent on every frequency Earth could generate, powerful enough to reach across the galaxy. Within hours, replies started coming back from hegemony outposts, most expressing shock and disbelief. No species had ever told the Empire no before. Jake looked out at the stars through the observation window of Luna Station. Somewhere out there, an empire that ruled most of the galaxy was probably deciding how to respond to Earth's defiance. The smart money said they would send a fleet to crush the upstart humans before other species got similar ideas. But Jake had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. Earth's military was small compared to a galactic empire, but it was built for exactly this kind of fight. Human soldiers, sailors, and pilots had been training for years to face an enemy with superior numbers and technology. More importantly, Earth had something the hegemony had probably forgotten existed: the willingness to fight for freedom no matter what the odds. Jake had studied enough history to know that empires always underestimated people who refused to be conquered. He activated his communication panel and started sending orders to every military base and space station in the solar system. The war was coming, and Earth would be ready. The hegemony fleet arrived exactly 6 months after Earth's rejection message, just as Admiral Jake Morrison had predicted they would. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, their massive hulls blocking out stars as they formed a battle line between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. Captain Roy Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the enemy fleet through his ship's sensors. Each hegemony vessel was at least twice the size of his destroyer, and some of the larger ships were big enough to carry entire armies. The flagship at the center of the formation was a monster called the Endless Dominion, stretching over 2 miles from bow to stern. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship," reported Lieutenant Sarah Jones from the communication station. "Put it on screen," Roy ordered. The main display filled with the image of another alien, this one looking like a walking shark with 4 arms. The creature wore military decorations across its chest and spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "I am War Commander Zefkai of the Imperial Navy. You will surrender immediately or face destruction. This is your only warning." Roy looked around at his crew. Every face showed the same expression: determination mixed with fear. They all knew the odds, but they also knew what surrender meant. "This is Captain Mitchell of the Terran Defense Force," Roy replied. "You are trespassing in our space. Leave now or we will remove you." The alien's shark-like mouth opened in what might have been laughter. "Your entire fleet consists of less than 50 ships. We have brought 300. Mathematics is clearly not your species' strength. Maybe not, Roy said. But we're pretty good at fighting. The transmission ended, and Roy turned to his tactical officer. Send the signal to all ships. Execute Plan Alpha. Across the solar system, human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and moons suddenly came to life. The hegemony had expected to find Earth's fleet gathered together for a traditional battle, but humans had learned different lessons from their history of warfare. The UES Liberty, commanded by Captain Jenny Adams, emerged from behind Europa and launched a full spread of missiles at the nearest enemy cruiser. The hegemony ship's shields absorbed most of the damage, but several missiles punched through, sending explosions rippling across the alien hull. Before the enemy could respond, Jenny's ship had already disappeared behind Jupiter's radiation field, where the hegemony sensors couldn't track it. Similar attacks erupted throughout the solar system as human ships struck without warning and vanished before return fire could reach them. War Commander HFY watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The human attacks made no sense, according to standard military doctrine. Where was their main battle line? Why weren't they trying to defend their homeworld directly? "Sir, we're taking losses," reported his tactical officer. "These hit-and-run attacks are disrupting our formation." "Impossible," HFY growled. "They have no ships large enough to threaten us." But the reports kept coming in. Human ships were appearing everywhere at once, launching attacks and disappearing. Before his forces could coordinate a response, each individual attack was small, but together they were slowly bleeding his fleet. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker led a squadron of 6 stealth frigates in a strike against a hegemony supply convoy that had just arrived from outside the system. His ships had been modified with experimental cloaking technology that made them nearly invisible to enemy sensors. "Remember, we hit fast and hard, then we run," Steve told his pilots over the communication system. "Don't try to be heroes. Our job is to make them hurt, not to win the war in one battle." The human ships dropped their cloaking just long enough to launch their attack. Missiles and energy beams tore into the surprised supply ships, destroying 3 transports and damaging 2 others before the escort vessels could even begin to respond. By the time the hegemony fighters scrambled to intercept them, Steve's squadron had already re-engaged their cloaking systems and disappeared into the asteroid belt. The enemy pilots found themselves shooting at empty space while the real target slipped away undetected. On Earth, Chief Engineer Maria Santos worked 18-hour days converting civilian factories into military production facilities. Assembly. Lines that had been making hover cars were now turning out missiles. Shipyards that built passenger liners were constructing destroyers and frigates as fast as their automated systems could work. "We need more titanium for the hull plating," Maria told her assistant as they walked through the main production facility in Brazil. Around them, thousands of workers and robots labored to keep up with the military's demands. "The asteroid mining stations are working at full capacity," her assistant replied, checking his datapad. "But the hegemony is trying to cut off our supply lines." Maria nodded. She had expected this. The enemy strategy was simple: surround Earth and starve it into submission. But they didn't understand how humans thought about war. Every siege in human history had eventually been broken, usually by the people being besieged finding ways to fight back that their enemies never expected. Dr. Amy Foster's team had been working on artificial intelligence systems for Earth's military ships. Unlike the rigid programming that most species used, human AI was designed to learn and adapt during combat. Each battle made the systems smarter and more effective. "The latest combat data shows our ships are getting better at predicting enemy movements," Amy reported during the daily military briefing. "Our AI is learning to recognize hegemony tactical patterns faster than they can change them." Admiral Morrison studied the tactical displays showing the positions of both fleets. The hegemony had settled into a standard blockade formation, designed to prevent any ships from entering or leaving the solar system. It was exactly what he had hoped they would do. "They're fighting the last war," Jake said to his staff officers. "Every victory they've had for the past 1,000 years has been won the same way. Overwhelming force in direct confrontation. They don't know how to handle an enemy that refuses to fight on their terms." The first major test came when a hegemony Battle Group tried to advance toward Mars. Captain Dan Miller, commanding the destroyer UES Freedom, led a formation of 12 human ships in a direct assault against the enemy force. But instead of engaging in a traditional ship-to-ship battle, the human vessels used their superior speed and maneuverability to stay just outside the range of the hegemony's main weapons. They darted in to launch attacks, then retreated before the slower alien ships could respond effectively. The battle lasted for 6 hours, with the human ships gradually wearing down their opponents through hundreds of small attacks. By the end, 3 hegemony cruisers had been destroyed and 2 more were heavily damaged, while the human fleet had lost only 1 frigate. War Commander HFY realized that his assumptions about human military capability had been completely wrong. These weren't primitive savages with crude weapons. They were experienced fighters who understood how to use their strengths against a larger enemy. "Send a message to High Command," he ordered his communication officer. "Tell them we need reinforcements. These humans are more dangerous than we thought." But the message would take weeks to reach the hegemony capital, and weeks more for reinforcements to arrive. In the meantime, the siege of Earth was turning into something no one in the Empire had expected: a fair fight. Captain Roy Mitchell brought his ship in close to one of the smaller hegemony vessels, close enough that his crew could see alien faces through the enemy ship's viewports. The 2 ships exchanged fire at point-blank range, energy beams and missiles lighting up the space between them. The hegemony ship was larger and more heavily armed, but the Defiance was faster and its crew was more experienced. Roy's gunners concentrated their fire on specific points on the enemy hull, punching through armor and destroying vital systems with surgical precision. When the alien ship finally exploded, Roy felt no satisfaction. This was just one small victory in what would be a very long war. But it was a start, and sometimes that was enough. The siege would continue for months, but the pattern was already established. The hegemony had come expecting to crush a primitive species in a matter of days. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that grew stronger with each battle, learning from every encounter and adapting faster than the Empire could respond. Earth had chosen war over slavery, and now the galaxy would see what humans could do when their freedom was at stake. Commander Beth Collins had never expected to become a spy, but the war had changed many things about her life. She sat in a hidden bunker beneath the surface of Titan, Saturn's largest moon, listening to encrypted messages from across the galaxy. Her job was to find anyone who might be willing to help Earth fight the hegemony. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A message arrived on a frequency that most humans had never heard of, sent by someone calling themselves Freedom. The transmission was short and simple. "We have been waiting for someone like you. The Zilani remember what freedom means." Beth forwarded the message to Admiral Morrison, who immediately authorized her to make contact. Within days, she was communicating with resistance groups on 17 different worlds. All of them had one thing in common: they were tired of living under hegemony rule. The Zilani of Proxima 7 had been conquered 300 years ago. They were skilled engineers who had been forced to build weapons for the Empire, while their own world was stripped of resources. The crystal-like Thekri of the Vega system had similar stories. Even some groups within hegemony member species were growing tired of the Empire's demands. Dr. Alex Turner had been working on communication technology in his laboratory on Luna, station when Beth's intelligence reports gave him an idea. If Earth could talk to resistance groups across the galaxy, they could coordinate attacks that would force the hegemony to spread their forces thin. The problem was that normal, faster-than-light communication took hours or days to travel between star systems. By the time Earth sent a message and received a reply, any planned attack would be useless. Alex needed something faster. His solution came from quantum physics. By linking particles at the atomic level, he could create an instantaneous communication network that worked across any distance. The hegemony had declared such technology impossible, which gave Earth a significant advantage. The first test worked perfectly, Alex reported to Admiral Morrison during their weekly briefing. "We can now talk to our contacts on Proxima 7 in real time. They're ready to begin operations whenever we give the word." Jake Morrison studied the tactical displays showing hegemony positions throughout the galaxy, War Commander Zefkai's siege fleet was still holding position around Earth, but intelligence reports showed that the Empire was beginning to worry about unrest on other worlds. "How many systems can we coordinate with?" Jake asked. 17, confirmed with more joining every day, Alex replied. "The resistance groups have been sharing our quantum communication technology with their allies. The network is growing faster than we can track." The first coordinated strike happened on a Tuesday morning Earth time. Human ships led by Captain Jenny Adams aboard the UES Liberty struck the hegemony naval base at Wolf 359, while simultaneously, Zelani saboteurs destroyed the main weapons factory on Proxima 7, and Thekri rebels cut communication lines throughout the Vega system. The attacks were timed to happen within minutes of each other, creating chaos throughout the hegemony's command structure. Military commanders found themselves dealing with emergencies in multiple systems, while their communication networks failed and supply lines were disrupted. War Commander Zefkai received the first reports while he was planning another assault on Earth's outer defenses. His tactical display lit up with red warning symbols as reports of attacks poured in from across hegemony space. "Sir, we're receiving distress calls from 17 different systems," his communication officer reported. "The attacks appear to be coordinated." Zefkai stared at the display in disbelief. How could primitive humans coordinate attacks across such vast distances? The technology required for real-time galactic communication was supposed to be beyond their capabilities. "Request immediate reinforcements from all nearby fleets," he ordered, "and find out how they're doing this." But the reinforcements were already being pulled away from the siege to deal with emergencies elsewhere. The hegemony's rigid command structure, which had served them well for conquering individual worlds, was proving inadequate for fighting a galaxy-wide rebellion. General Frank Cooper had been planning the assault on Alpha Centauri for months. The hegemony's primary military base in that system was heavily defended, but it was also the key to their entire regional command structure. If Earth could capture or destroy it, the siege fleet around Sol would be cut off from reinforcements and supplies. Frank's force consisted of captured hegemony transport ships filled with human marines wearing advanced power armor. The plan was risky: drop directly onto the base's main landing platform and fight their way to the command center before the defenders could organize a proper response. "Remember, we're not trying to hold territory," Frank told his officers as they prepared for the drop. "We get in, destroy their command systems and supply depots, then get out. Speed and violence of action are our best weapons." The assault began at dawn, local time. Human drop pods slammed into the base's landing platforms, while fighter escorts engaged the hegemony's air defenses. The alien defenders had never faced an enemy willing to land directly in the middle of their strongest position. Private Jack Ryan was among the first Marines to hit the ground. His power armor's sensors showed dozens of enemy soldiers moving to surround the landing zone, but the humans were already advancing toward their objectives. Jack's squad fought their way through corridors designed for much larger alien species, using their smaller size and superior mobility to outmaneuver confused defenders. The battle for the command center lasted 3 hours. Hegemony soldiers were larger and stronger than humans, but they fought like individuals while the Marines worked as coordinated teams. Human tactics, developed through centuries of warfare, proved superior to the Empire's reliance on overwhelming force. When the base finally fell, General Cooper's forces had destroyed the main computer systems, blown up the primary weapons storage facility, and captured enough intelligence data to plan future operations. More importantly, they had proven that hegemony bases could be taken by direct assault. Captain Dan Miller's battleship UES Freedom led the evacuation, fighting through a hegemony response fleet that arrived just as the Marines were withdrawing. The battle was fierce, but the human ships had learned to work together in ways that the Empire's rigid formations couldn't counter. By the time Miller's fleet jumped back to Earth space, they had destroyed or damaged 12 enemy warships while losing only 2 frigates. The victory at Alpha Centauri sent shockwaves throughout hegemony territory and inspired resistance groups on dozens of other worlds. Dr. Amy Foster's artificial intelligence systems had been learning from every battle, and the results were becoming obvious to anyone who studied the combat reports. Human ships were now predicting enemy movements with remarkable accuracy, while their adaptive tactics made it nearly impossible for hegemony commanders to develop effective countermeasures. Our AI systems are evolving faster than the enemy can adapt, Amy reported during the monthly strategy meeting. Each battle makes our ships smarter while their rigid programming keeps making the same mistakes. Admiral Morrison looked at the latest intelligence report showing hegemony forces being withdrawn from the siege to deal with rebellions throughout their territory. What had started as a simple punishment of one upstart species was turning into the Empire's worst nightmare, a coordinated revolt that threatened their control over hundreds of worlds. How long before they collapse completely? Asked President Carter during a secure communication link from Earth. Hard to say, Jake replied, but they're already pulling ships away from our blockade. If this keeps up, they won't have enough forces to maintain control anywhere. Captain Roy Mitchell brought his destroyer alongside the damaged hegemony cruiser that had been trying to break through Earth's defense perimeter. The alien ship's weapons were silent, its hull breached in a dozen places. Through the gaps in the armor, Roy could see alien crew members floating in the vacuum of space. There was no satisfaction in the sight. These weren't evil monsters. They were soldiers following orders just like him. But they had chosen to serve an empire that enslaved entire species, and that choice had consequences. The siege was breaking. Hegemony ships were leaving the solar system daily, recalled to deal with emergencies elsewhere. Those that remained were clearly demoralized, their attacks becoming less coordinated and more desperate. Earth had done more than survive the Empire's assault. They had inspired a galaxy-wide revolution that was tearing the hegemony apart from within. The small blue world that had dared to say no was proving that freedom was contagious, and that even the largest empire could fall if enough people decided to stand up and fight. Admiral Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the UES Constitution, watching as another star system declared its independence from the hegemony. The rebellion that had started with Earth's defiance 2 years ago had now spread to over 300 worlds. What the Empire had once called impossible was happening right in front of their eyes. Lisa commanded the Terran Liberation Fleet, a growing force of human ships and vessels from freed worlds. The fleet had grown from Earth's original 50 ships to over 400, with new vessels joining every week as more species broke free from hegemony control. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Corvani shipyards, reported Captain Bill Hayes from the communications station. They're offering to build 20 new battleships for our fleet. Lisa smiled. The Corvani had been master shipbuilders before the hegemony conquered them and forced them to build only imperial vessels. Now that they were free, they were eager to use their skills for the rebellion. Their ships were some of the finest in the galaxy, combining advanced technology with elegant design. Accept their offer, Lisa said, and ask them what they need in return. The answer came back quickly. The Corvani wanted protection from hegemony retaliation and access to Earth's quantum communication network. Both requests were easy to grant, and within days human ships were patrolling the Corvani system, while their shipyards began construction on vessels designed specifically for the Liberation Fleet. President Carter was preparing for the most important speech of her career. Representatives from 43 freed worlds had gathered on Earth's orbital station for the first meeting of the Galactic Liberation Council. The goal was simple: create a new form of government that would prevent any single species from ever, again, controlling others. The old empire ruled through fear and force, President Carter told the assembled delegates. We must build something better. A system where every world has a voice, where no species can be enslaved by another, where freedom is protected by law rather than military strength. The Dieth representative, a tall creature that looked like a walking tree, raised one of its branch-like arms. The humans speak of freedom, but how do we know you will not become the new rulers? Your military has proven very effective. Carter had expected this question. Many species were naturally suspicious after centuries of imperial rule. Earth seeks no empire. We want only to ensure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. That's why we're proposing a confederation rather than a central government. The debate continued for days. Some species wanted strong central authority to prevent chaos. Others demanded complete independence for each world. The humans found themselves acting as mediators. helping different groups find common ground. Captain Dan Miller was leading the decisive battle at Korvek Prime, the hegemony's fortress world deep in their core territory. The planet was surrounded by defense stations and protected by the largest fleet the Empire could assemble. Taking it would prove that nowhere in hegemony space was safe from the rebellion. "All ships, this is Miller," Dan broadcast to the Liberation Fleet. "Remember, we're not trying to conquer this world. We're here to break their military power and free the people they've enslaved. Stay focused on military targets." The battle began when human stealth ships disabled the outer defense stations, creating gaps in the planet's protective shield. Liberation Fleet vessels poured through these openings, engaging hegemony ships in close combat where their superior tactics and AI systems gave them the advantage. The UES Freedom led a squadron of mixed ships from 6 different species against the enemy flagship. The hegemony admiral commanding the defense had never faced such a diverse force. Each species fought differently, creating unpredictable attack patterns that his tactical computers couldn't analyze. Dr. Helen Carter, the president's sister and Earth's chief diplomat, was working to prevent the war from becoming a simple revenge against the hegemony. Many freed species wanted to destroy every trace of the Empire, but Helen knew that complete destruction would only create more problems. "We need some hegemony species to survive as independent worlds," she explained to the Liberation Council. "If we destroy everyone who was part of the Empire, we become no better than they were." Her most important success came with the Valeks, a species that had served as administrators throughout hegemony space. Many liberation forces wanted to execute every Valeks they found, viewing them as collaborators. But Helen negotiated a deal that allowed Valeks worlds to surrender peacefully in exchange for help in transitioning to independence. The psychological effect of these surrenders was enormous. For the first time in hegemony history, entire sectors were switching sides without being conquered. The Empire's claim to inevitable victory was crumbling, as their own member species chose freedom over security. High Archon Veltar sat in his command chamber on the Imperial capital world, staring at reports that seemed impossible. The rebellion had spread to every corner of his empire. Worlds that had been loyal for centuries were declaring independence. Even his own capital system was showing signs of unrest. "How did this happen?" he demanded of his advisors. "How did one primitive species destroy an empire that has lasted for 2,000 years? His military advisor, a 4-armed creature covered in scales, shifted nervously. "The humans fight differently than any species we've encountered. They don't just defeat our forces, they inspire others to join them. Every victory makes the rebellion stronger." Veltar's intelligence chief added, "They've also developed technologies we thought impossible. Their communication systems allow them to coordinate across the entire galaxy. Their artificial intelligence adapts faster than our tactics can change." But it was the Empire's chief sociologist who provided the most disturbing analysis. "The humans have introduced a concept that threatens the very foundation of our rule, the idea that freedom is worth any price. This concept is spreading faster than we can contain it." Captain Susan Wright commanded the exploration vessel GSV Harmony, the first joint species ship built by the Liberation Alliance. Her crew included humans, Corvani, Zelani, and members of 12 other species, all working together as equals. The ship represented everything the old empire had claimed was impossible. "We're receiving signals from beyond the former hegemony border," reported her Dieth navigator. "There are civilizations out there that have never been contacted by the Empire." Susan smiled. After the war ended, there would be so much to explore. The galaxy was much larger than the hegemony had ever admitted, filled with species that had remained free by staying hidden. Now they could emerge and join the growing confederation of free worlds. The liberation of Korvek Prime took 3 weeks of intense fighting. When the planet finally surrendered, Captain Miller's forces found evidence of the Empire's true nature. Massive prison camps holding millions of beings from dozens of species, forced labor facilities that had operated for centuries, and research stations where entire populations had been used for experiments. The discovery sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Even species that had remained neutral in the war began joining the rebellion. The hegemony's claims about bringing order and civilization to the galaxy were revealed as lies covering systematic oppression and genocide. Admiral Grant received surrender offers from 17 hegemony worlds in a single day. The Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted. Species that had served the hegemony for generations were switching sides, bringing their fleets and resources to the liberation cause. "We need to start planning for what comes after the war," Lisa told her staff during their daily briefing. "Destroying the Empire is only the first step. Building something better will be much harder." The challenge was enormous. Hundreds of worlds with different cultures, technologies, and needs had to learn to work together. Some species had been enemies for centuries before the hegemony conquered them. Others had never had contact with the outside galaxy. But the rebellion had proven that cooperation was possible. Human tactics combined with Corvani shipbuilding, Zalani engineering, and Diath mathematics had created a military force more effective than anything the galaxy had ever seen. If they could work together in war, perhaps they could work together in peace. Dr. Chris Anderson published his first report on the war's social effects while the fighting was still ongoing. His research showed that freed worlds were already experiencing dramatic improvements in living standards, technological development, and social freedom. The liberation wasn't just military, it was cultural and economic as well. The average citizen on a freed world has opportunities that would have been impossible under hegemony rule, Chris wrote. They can choose their own careers, develop their own technologies, and interact with other species as equals rather than as subjects. The report was distributed throughout the galaxy, encouraging more worlds to join the rebellion. Even in the hegemony's core territories, citizens were beginning to question why they should remain loyal to an empire that offered them nothing but servitude. As the fourth year of the war began, the Galactic hegemony controlled less than 20% of its former territory. The rebellion had become a revolution, and the revolution was winning. Fleet Admiral Roy Davidson stood on the bridge of the UES Constitution, watching as the last remnants of the Galactic hegemony prepared to surrender. 5 years had passed since Earth first declared the Empire persona non grata, and now the tables had completely turned. The mighty empire that once ruled 70% of the galaxy controlled only a handful of core worlds around their original capital. The ceremony was taking place in orbit around Hegemon Prime, the former imperial capital. Representatives from over 200 free worlds had gathered to witness the signing of the Galactic Freedom Charter, a document that would reshape how civilizations interacted across the stars. High Archon Veltar, the same alien who had delivered the original ultimatum to Earth, now stood as a broken leader before the assembled delegates. His elaborate robes were gone, replaced by simple gray clothing. His yellow eyes no longer held arrogance, only defeat and confusion. "I do not understand," Veltar said to President Carter as they prepared for the formal surrender. "How did your species accomplish what we believed impossible? We had superior numbers, better technology, more experience." President Carter looked at the alien leader with something that might have been pity. "You made the same mistake that every tyrant in history has made. You confused fear with loyalty, and control with strength. When people have something worth fighting for, numbers don't matter as much as you think." The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy on the quantum communication network that Dr. Alex Turner had developed. Billions of beings watched as the Galactic Freedom Charter was officially adopted, establishing principles that would govern interstellar relations for generations to come. The charter was simple but revolutionary. No species could claim dominion over another. Every world had the right to choose its own government and way of life. Disputes between worlds would be resolved through negotiation and mutual agreement rather than force. Any species that tried to build a new empire would face the combined opposition of all free worlds. Captain Susan Wright had been chosen to command the GSV Harmony on its historic mission beyond the former hegemony borders. Her crew represented 23 different species, all working together as equals on the first joint exploration vessel in galactic history. "We're picking up signals from a previously unknown civilization," reported her Corvani science officer. "They appear to be broadcasting on multiple frequencies, possibly trying to make contact." Susan smiled. This was exactly what she had hoped for. The galaxy was much larger than anyone had realized during the years of hegemony rule. Entire civilizations had remained hidden, waiting for the empire to fall before revealing themselves. "Open a channel," Susan ordered. "Let's see what they have to say." The reply came in broken but understandable Galactic standard language. "This is the Neth Confederacy. We have monitored your broadcasts about freedom and cooperation. We wish to learn more about your alliance." Within hours, Susan was in communication with representatives of a dozen previously unknown species. All of them had stories of hiding from hegemony expansion, developing their own technologies and cultures in isolation. Now, they wanted to join the growing Confederation of Free Worlds. Dr. Chris Anderson was putting the finishing touches on his comprehensive study of the war's impact when the news of the new species arrived. His research showed that the collapse of the hegemony had unleashed an explosion of creativity and progress throughout the galaxy. The average technological advancement rate on freed worlds has increased by over 300%, Chris wrote in his final report. When species are free to develop their own solutions to problems, innovation flourishes in ways that centralized control could never achieve. The report documented improvements in everything from medical technology to space travel. The Zelani had developed new forms of faster-than-light travel that were safer and more efficient than anything the hegemony had used. The Dieth had created mathematical models that allowed for more precise navigation across galactic distances. Even Earth had benefited, with human scientists learning from alien techniques and applying them to solve problems that had puzzled them for centuries. Ambassador Tony Garcia was preparing for his first official meeting with the Neth Confederacy when he received an unexpected message. A small ship had arrived at the orbital station where the Galactic Council now met, carrying representatives from a species that had never been contacted before. The aliens looked like tall, slender humanoids with pale blue skin and large black eyes. Their leader, who introduced herself as Coordinator Zella, explained that they had been watching galactic events from a distance. "We have observed your species for many years," Zella told Tony as they sat in the station's diplomatic quarters. "We were curious about the beings who started this revolution. We have heard many stories, but we wanted to meet humans for ourselves." Tony leaned back in his chair, still amazed by how much the galaxy had changed. "What kind of stories have you heard?" "That your species began this war simply because someone told you that you had no choice," Zella replied. "Is this true?" Tony laughed. "That's a pretty accurate summary, yes. The hegemony gave us an ultimatum: surrender or be isolated. We chose a third option, which was, we chose to fight for our freedom and help others do the same. It turns out that when you give people hope that change is possible, they're willing to take risks they never would have considered before." The conversation continued for hours, with Zella asking detailed questions about human culture, history, and philosophy. She was particularly interested in humanity's approach to warfare and diplomacy. "Your species seems to have an unusual relationship with conflict," she observed. "You fight when necessary, but you also seek to minimize harm to your enemies. This is not common among the species we have studied." Tony nodded. "We learned long ago that defeating an enemy and destroying them are two different things. The goal of war should be to create a better peace, not just to win." Captain Dan Miller was leading the final cleanup operations in former hegemony space when he received orders to investigate a distress signal from a remote system. His ship, the UES Freedom, had been renamed the GSV Freedom to reflect its new role as part of the Joint Galactic Fleet. The distress signal came from a small research station that had been abandoned during the war. When Miller's team arrived, they found a group of hegemony scientists who had been studying ancient ruins on a lifeless planet. "We thought everyone had forgotten about us," the lead scientist explained as Miller's crew provided medical aid and supplies. "We've been here for 2 years, trying to understand these ruins. They appear to be from a civilization that existed before the hegemony." The discovery was significant. The ruins contained evidence of a galactic civilization that had existed thousands of years before the hegemony rose to power. Like the current Confederation, it had been based on cooperation, rather than domination, but something had caused it to collapse, leaving only scattered ruins across the galaxy. Dr. Helen Carter was working with a team of historians and archaeologists to study the ancient civilization when she made a disturbing discovery. The ruins contained warnings about the dangers of allowing any single group to gain too much power over others. They faced the same choice we did, Helen reported to the Galactic Council. They could have used their advanced technology to dominate other species, but they chose cooperation instead. The ruins suggest that they lasted for over 10,000 years before something went wrong. The warnings from the ancient civilization led to additional safeguards being added to the Galactic Freedom Charter. No single species could hold more than a certain percentage of positions in the galactic government. Military forces would be drawn from multiple worlds to prevent any one group from gaining too much influence. Most importantly, the charter included provisions for regular review and revision, ensuring that it could adapt to changing circumstances. President Carter stood in the memorial garden on Earth, looking at the names of those who had died fighting for freedom. The war had cost humanity dearly, but it had also given them something precious, the knowledge that they could make a difference in the galaxy. Was it worth it? Asked a reporter who was interviewing her for a documentary about the war. Carter was quiet for a long moment before answering. 5 years ago, billions of beings lived in slavery, told that they had no choice but to serve an empire that cared nothing for their welfare. Today, those same beings are free to choose their own paths, to develop their own cultures, to reach for the stars on their own terms. Yes, it was worth it. The reporter pressed further. But what made humanity different? Why were you able to succeed where others had failed? Carter smiled, thinking of all the species that had joined the fight, all the worlds that had chosen freedom over security, all the individuals who had risked everything for the chance to be free. I think it comes down to something very simple, she said. We refuse to accept that any situation was hopeless. When someone tells humans they have no choice, we tend to prove them wrong by creating new choices they never imagined. The galaxy had learned that lesson well. From the smallest colony world to the largest space station, beings who had once lived in fear now looked to the future with hope. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun. Ambassador Garcia was welcoming.